Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining today's panel discussion where we will be talking about strategy, talent, change, and workplaces. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors and cover some upcoming New Jersey chapter events. So starting with the diamond level, we have WB Wood. Gold is Dolphin, Turner Construction, HLW, PSNG, RDA, and Audible. Silver is CFI, Technion, Knoll, Onyx, UL, Structure Tone, McCarter and English. Bronze is Gensler, and supporters are JLL, Axios Inc., and Mancini Duffy. Attendees will remain on mute throughout the program. Please enter questions in the Q&A box throughout the session. Questions will be addressed during the panel discussion. If you are having technical difficulties, please enter them into the chat box. So here's some upcoming events that we want to make you aware of. So we have the Women's Group Virtual Breakfast. This is a two-part series, Navigating Burnout, May 13th and May 27th at 9 a.m. Cornet Virtual Eastern Region Symposium, the ERS event, is May 17th at 2:30 p.m. That's going to be pretty exciting because we're going to be having a new technology format. There's going to be a networking event afterwards, so we do hope everyone can join that event as well as the others. But there's been a lot of planning that's gone into the ERS this year. We're also going to have a fireside chat with author Jennifer Brown. She authored the book How to Be an Inclusive Leader. That was the book we read during our book club this year, and it was very insightful and a great read. Happy Hour, Inclusive and Equitable Environments in Real Estate and Construction, June 17th, 4 p.m. And Cornet, New Jersey Golf Outing. That should be fun, I'm sure. June 29th, 11:30 a.m. So again, the ERS, you can see that registration is now open to all Cornet Global members, end users, and service providers from the New England, Connecticut, Westchester, Mid-Atlantic, New Jersey, New York City, and Philadelphia chapters are now eligible to register for 2021 Cornet Eastern Regional Symposium. Hope you make it there. So here we are today. I'm going to introduce our panelists. It's an honor, starting with Lori Rothenberg, the Assistant General Counsel with Real Estate and Workplace at Pfizer. We have Alexandra Sanchez. She's the Associate Director at Workplace Strategy at Merck. Lisa McGregor, she's the Global Lead Space Strategies for Jacobs, and myself, I'm the co-chair for the Education Committee for the New Jersey chapter, and also a change management leader with Verizon. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Today's conversation will be people-centered focused, starting with strategic considerations for organizations and leaders as they plan for the return to office. We will also talk about approaches to facilitate the transition back to the workplace, and this is beyond masks and social distancing. And then we will discuss place as a contributor to a greater sense of value and purpose for organizations. So starting with the first topic, strategic considerations for return. I'm going to begin with Lori. What are the strategic considerations when planning the return to the workplace? People-centric considerations, that is.
Thanks, Karen, and thank you to the New Jersey chapter for having me on this panel. It's good to be here. In terms of strategic considerations that as we return to the workplace and as we look towards the future workplace, there's three things that I think had shifted. So we have the company needs to lead with empathy, and I'll get into that a bit. We need to consider the sustainability is no longer a nice to have, but now it's really a necessity that employees require in order to come into the office. And we need to have a nimble leadership strategy that's going to have a flexible real estate workplace strategy both in terms of our leasing strategy and the design. So in terms of empathy, I'm thinking of, we have been looking into people's homes now, quite literally through Zoom over the last year. And we've seen all of their vulnerabilities, right? We've seen where people's childcare needs are, their health and mental wellness concerns, all of the different pressures that people are dealing with outside of the workplace. And in order for people to be able to bring their whole self to work, companies need to address that and acknowledge that. One of the ways to do that is through this sustainable and healthy workplace design that looks at, first, the safety element. People are afraid to come back to the work, right? Is it safe for me to go there? And then also addressing the workplace through strategies that make it easier and more convenient for the workers to come and bring their whole self and then become more productive and engaged when they get here. And then in terms of nimbleness, the strategy needs to start considering change is going to happen, right? First, we've had the pandemic. Industries that were here before are, were majorly hit in the last year, and others blossomed, right? Zoom was nothing a year and a half ago, and now it's, great stock that I wish I had bought, right? So you need to be nimble and have your real estate strategy be able to reflect that.
Great, that's an interesting perspective. I'd like to shift over to Alex. What are your thoughts on that?
So I completely agree. First of all, hi everyone, and thank you for having me. But I completely agree with Lori's take on leading with empathy. I think leaders are going to be key in this new reality, if you will, in this new paradigm for the workplace. And part of that new leadership, for it to be successful, it needs to come from the heart, right? Leaders, like Lori mentioned, they've been looking into our homes through these little windows for over a year now, right? So I think, and we've been looking into their homes as well, right? So I think if there's a silver lining to this, one of that silver lining is that human element. So I think to move forward, we need to lead with empathy, we need to lead with heart, and ensure that people understand that their leaders understand them as human beings. So yes, it's about the work, it's about being a successful organization, but it's about your people being your most valuable assets, and you recognizing that.
That is so true, Alex. That's great points on that. Lisa, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, again, I completely agree on the empathetic, people-focused part, but let's face it, organizations tend to be selfish, right? It's the business of the business, but even from that perspective, there's value in the more people-centric focus. Organizations willing to think differently, there really is an opportunity. An agile mindset is required to compete in any industry, regardless of what that is, to be responsive to evolving business drivers and the impacts of this rapid digital transformation that every industry is going through right now. With talent as really, something that all organizations are competing for as a key differentiator, embracing this new distributed work models is really where the opportunity lies. Many organizations, and again, it may seem selfish on their part, are now thinking, how can I expand my talent sourcing more globally, right? How can I potentially get more value or tap into different types of knowledge centers and different talent and resources? So that's actually win-win, right? That creates opportunities, broader opportunities for many across the globe, and it also brings potentially more value to the companies. But additionally, that same opportunity brings opportunity for people to potentially grow and expand in their roles within the organization from a career. This new distributed work model where you don't have to physically be there, you could virtually be there and participate in that type of involvement, really allow organizations to better leverage their global talent resources wherever the talent is, and create really, I think this competition for talent, again, is what has created a heightened discussion around culture, because as talent no longer needs to be location or region dependent, I think organizations are concerned that they may, everyone wants to attract and retain talent. How do they not lose their talent? How is their key talent not vulnerable to other organizations wanting to potentially steal their talent? And it's interesting because many organizations, from their broader organizational brand, can attract for that macro culture that they're known for or purpose that they're known for. However, retaining talent, it's essential to really think about those microcultures, which is really how people feel, individuals feel, right? A sense of belonging and connectedness to an organization. And that's how you retain talent. So again, it may be from those broader selfish business driver perspectives, but being people-centered and people-focused actually helps benefit the business of the business.
Right. Couldn't have said it better. That whole empathy element is just so critical. And I think with new talent, right, that will really come through to those employees. But you also talked about culture. Before we go to the next topic, I'm just wondering, Alex and Lori, do you have any other thoughts as to what Lisa just talked about? Because she covered some really important points there.
The only thing I would add to that, and just on the subject of culture, is the acknowledgement. I think it's going to be important to strategically acknowledge that there's going to be new paradigms again, and that are going to affect your culture, right? And culture is what it is. So it's just a matter of acknowledging what it is, assessing what your culture is, and identifying how can you help transform that culture so that you can continue to thrive as the workplace changes and evolves, and our places of work, I should say, change and evolve. So that's the point I would do. And the last point I would make on this is, we're talking about culture, we're talking about talent, we're talking about leadership, but strategically we have to think about, what do our people need to thrive, practically speaking, right? What are the policies, the procedures, the protocols, the tools that they need? So somebody needs to also be thinking at the strategic level, how can we equip this talent to really be successful and help us make this organization even more successful?
Yeah, I think in terms of considerations for culture, we also need to think about, why are we having people go back to work, right? There's a lot of talk about going back for collaboration, but then there's also talk about going back for flexibility. And I think that they can be really in tension, right? So if you have especially in a smaller company or smaller office, if you have a lot of people and you want to give them flexibility, well, what if they all decide to go in on Tuesday, but one person wants to go in on Wednesday? Nobody's there to collaborate with, right? So what is the driver? Is it the flexibility you want to give to your employees, or is it the collaboration, which is the primary driver? And then developing the policies and the norms so that people understand how to organize their work week around that.
Great points. And, I believe I neglected to mention, just so all of you know, please note that the views expressed today by our panelists are personal opinions and do not necessarily reflect those of their organization. So please forgive me, I needed to mention that at the beginning, but that's okay. So let's go ahead and go to the next topic. Transition preparedness. This is a great segue based on what you've been mentioning. Starting with Alex, what tools, tactical preparations should companies provide to facilitate by making the transition back and to encourage its continued success?
So I'm going to jump in using one word that Lori just mentioned, and that is intention, right? So I think we need to be very clear about being intentional when we come back to the workplace. Not only in general, right? Why do we want to come back to the workplace? Is it for collaboration? But also equipping, like I said, those teams to make those intentional plans and decisions, right? So when do you need your team on site and why? How do you create events or situations or points in time where your team needs to be at a place if you need them to collaborate, right? You need to give them a reason to be there, a reason to move away from the Zoom camera, right? And go and collaborate. I know we all want to go back. We all miss people, but let's face it, if we are concerned about COVID, if we have a 2-hour commute, right? We're going to need a reason to be back in the workplace. And I think it falls within organizations and within management and leadership to create those opportunities intentionally. With that said, and speaking of tools again and upskilling people, we've been used to managing in a different environment. True, some of us have been working remotely at least part of the time for a long time, but when we think about the transformation of workplaces, and I think we're going to touch on that next, but when we think about that, and we've alluded to a different paradigm a couple of times, what do we need to manage successfully teams in these new work environments? So if it is about intentionality, if it is about bringing teams together in a non-physical environment versus a physical environment and making those decisions, evaluating teams, we're going to have to equip managers and leaders with the tools they need to function in that manner. And the last thing I would say is about change management. Change management is a wonderful tool, but let's start thinking about it strategically and not as a hammer to just convince people that where we want to take them is the right place to go, right? That's not what it is about. Let's bring them on board and take this journey together and learn from our own employees, right? We all have a clear intent. We want to be successful in this new environment. We want this to work. We want flexibility. We want the opportunity to collaborate. We don't have all the answers. No one does. So I think when we bring people on board and start on a journey of changing the way we experience anything, they feel that they're part of the change, and we learn from each other, but it's smoother sailing into our goals.
I love that, Alex. You know how I feel about change management and the early discussions we had on that. I just love that expression, change management should be a strategic tool as opposed to a hammer. That just will stick with me forever. So let's go ahead and scoot over to Lisa. Lisa, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, again, you hit the nail on the head, Alex. Not to use the hammer pun. I know.
There you go.
But communication is really the heart of that, right? Communication is key to resetting expectations. Things are never going to completely be back to what they were before. So that regardless of the degree of change with what an organization is aspiring to achieve, it will never be what it was before, because expectations and perspectives on the ability to effectively work together remotely and connect virtually has changed. And that's good, right? How can we take that silver lining and use it as a positive moving forward? How do you reset expectations? It's through clear communications on what an activity value framework for how and where a variety of work activities are best conducted. Earlier there was talk about flexibility and people's choice. I think there needs to be a balance of that, if you just completely leave it up to people's individual choice, it doesn't mean that the most effective way of teams connecting or people connecting will always be. We can't completely have an adhocracy. So there need to be clear communications on what the organization, through study, has determined are the activities that are valued to happen in person. And again, to tap into those opportunities of leveraging a broader talent resource network, how then, when there are in-person events or collaborations, how do you bring in, again, those special resources that may be halfway around the world? And that's part of how global organizations are working right now. So we need to make sure that there's not only the how and where work should happen, but what are those behavioral protocols of how we should facilitate a workshop, or we should facilitate the most basic meeting to make sure that there is parity and equity for how people are able to participate and really have an opportunity to be a part of a team and don't have to necessarily be in the physical room for that to happen. And to what Alex said, I think there's also going to need to be protocols and education and awareness about different global and regional social norms about expectations for how and where people meet. And some of those, it's essentially a new set of manners, I think, is going to have to be established. And sometimes, you know, we're very used to everyone just gets something on their calendar and you show up in the room, and we've been showing up in the virtual room. I think there's going to be some training so that there's empathy between employees and how to work with one another. And again, that explicit idea of explicit social strategies to connect talent in meaningful ways for social cohesion, team relationship building, and opportunities for learning and mentorship. I think, you know, organizations need to establish guidelines for that as well, as to what expectations are there, so that place, with its new clear purpose as a destination for certain activities, again, will be celebrated and something that people look forward to going to as needed.
Great perspective. Lori, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So I wholeheartedly agree with the idea of communication. I think that the idea of communicating the new norms and what's expected, but also what the company has implemented to make the employees safe, so that whether it be increased ventilation or cleaning or whatever other measures have been implemented to make it a healthy workplace, that needs to be communicated to the colleagues. But I challenge one point that I think Alex first brought up, in that people are going back and people want to go back. Some people want to go back. So everybody has their difference. And I think this really goes to the diversity element, where some people are working at home and they have their own workspace. Some people don't, and so they need to get out. Other people are happier at home. Maybe they're an introvert, right? So there's a lot of different reasons why people may or may not want to go into the workplace. And that needs to be addressed by really thinking through what, again, as mentioned at the beginning, what are the pressures that the individuals are facing at home, and how can the workplace provide a better alternative to the employee, a more effective working environment that will increase their productivity, right? Because we're seeing a lot, okay, productivity at home has been up in some ways, but then there's also mental illness and burnout on the other side. So how are we alleviating that? By providing the workplace. And so I think a healthy workplace strategy will help achieve that. And then again, as I said, communicating that. Another thing I'd suggest is calling upon our partners, our business partners. So calling upon the landlords and the service providers to see, well, how can they help further the strategy? So for example, in a landlord situation, what are they doing to make the building safer? What amenities are they offering that you can, as a tenant, can pull upon and use, maybe for free, maybe at a cost, but using those, and then maybe implementing in your leasing strategy more flexibility, right? Because this is not going to be the last business disruption that we see, right? So we've had, a pandemic, but there could be a natural disaster, active shooting, whatever other types of crazy circumstances may occur. And you want to have the flexibility in your leasing strategy that can reflect that, right? Whether it be contraction, rights, renewals, expansion, and also the freedom to make alterations, right? As we are trying to deal with different configurations of people, can we move walls, things like that. And then in terms of our service providers, what, especially for a smaller company, how can you call upon your service provider? What technologies do they have, or what programs do they have that you can use if you just ask, right? So sometimes it's just asking the question and seeing what opportunities somebody else out there can provide.
Or that's a really great point, because it in this environment, it does take a community, right? And getting everyone together on the same page really helps us, you know, to move forward together better. But just before we go to the next topic, wondering if Lisa and Alex want to add to that, because they're doing a great job covering this particular topic, but I'd like to see if there's any more thoughts there. That's okay if there are.
Okay.
Yeah, but you know, just want to check in before we go to the next topic. All right, so the next topic is, what is the role of place in our new reality? And I think we've been talking a little bit about that, but we're going to go a little deeper on this, and we're going to go ahead and start with Lisa on this topic.
Thanks, Karen. As you know, I'm passionate about the notion of place. Again, I think for organizations to have an agile mindset, you know, this is really the time where you need to start thinking more broadly about what place and placemaking means. And instead of thinking of it as the physical, I go to work, work can happen anywhere. And we often refer to that as a distributed work platform. We were doing this before COVID. People were always found a way to work at home on Monday or Friday, or when they were traveling, that sort of thing. So again, I think we need to think more broadly about where work can happen. And we often refer to it as a distributed work or team platform. And that is essentially an ecosystem of virtual and physical work environments. And that can be for individual work, teamwork, connection to the organization, training and learning, a broad range of ways that we're connecting. I think many organizations have taken this last 15 months, I can't believe I'm saying it, 15 months, and really started to, you know, initially a year ago, it was how do we make sure everyone's connected and can meet virtually. And now people, I'm glad to see the long view for what are the tools that we need to be using to really build a broader system, ecosystem to support our talent and really focus again on that, the talent. One thing that Jacobs as an organization has been really focusing on and made some significant strides in is transforming how we have access to learning, our sort of E3 platform, which is for our individual talent performance, right? Because now, instead of me being evaluated on my presenteeism of physically sitting in the office, and then that has nothing necessarily to do with performance, connecting our systems and working on a variety of tools that can be more connected. Again, bringing that talent, connection to team, resources, and really bring more value. Now to the value of the physical place, again, we see that as shifting and not being a place where if you have a lot of individual work to do, as Lori mentioned, that can be quite productive, often more productive at home. That's of course different for different people. Some people, to be more productive for individual work, want to go in and go someplace. But predominantly, I think the reason for people going in is for things that require interaction with others. And some people just enjoy that in their day. And I think, again, the value of place really will be leveraged as an expression of brand, as a community hub for the organization, a place for connection for people and to connect with just the vibe and sense of an organization. So again, I think that different business groups within an organization need to think about how they will use that opportunity to create. There may be a need to actually create a new cadence of activities and new draws to provide that stickiness and that reason for going in for some. And again, we need to look at, why people are going to the workplace through the different business processes and the roles in those teams in order to effectively balance what types of spaces are needed. And that requires some study, but again, there can be potentially more flexibility and opportunity for how we use space when people do transition back.
No, that's great. That connection, place, and brand, excellent point. Lori, wondering what your thoughts are on that as well, in addition to what Lisa just shared.
Yeah, sure. So the role of place, I see it as having almost a risk reduction element to it going forward. And then it also offers the opportunity that Lisa alluded to. And it really is providing companies with the opportunity to manage both costs and their talents concerns. So, for example, people want to feel safe in the workplace, right? So you're reducing the risk by having certain types of workplace strategies, by having, whether it be a healthy workplace, implementing childcare policies, mental health supports, increased ventilation, the cleaning, all of that is reducing the risk that your employees are going to physically be completely absent, right? And so if they're physically absent, then they're not working. So there's your the risk reduction for the company, I guess, the non-altruistic point of it. And then you also have, excuse me, the fluctuations that people have in terms of the presenteeism, right? So when they come into the workplace, whether they're, or if they're at home with Zoom fatigue, right? You get the presenteeism from the colleagues, which means that they're not really fully paying attention. They're not really fully engaged. And reconnecting with the enterprise when people come into the workplace, they're able to regain that energy, see the colleagues, maybe have fortuitous run-ins, or simply just re-engage with the physical manifestation of the company itself. And so you get much more of the engagement and the productivity there. For the opportunity, the company is able to use the workplace as a way to reflect its values, right? So you can physically show that, right? Whether it be through posters or the design of the walls, however you decide that you want to structure the building. If your workplace, you can encourage employees to walk around through active design, right? Especially if you're a healthcare company, right? You're going to want to have people actively moving throughout the day. And you can really bring forward some of your different drivers and kind of the values that are the most important to you through your design. And it's a way to put that forth to your colleagues, as well as any of your visitors, whether they be customers or other business partners. So the company really has that opportunity to increase the productivity and the engagement of colleagues through the workplace. I think it offers that. One way I'd suggest that companies start approaching this is rethinking the whole model of real estate in its silo, right? Real estate and human resources are now more frequently being paired together. But we also need to not forget about the importance of finance, right? Who's going to pay for all of this? And are all of the goals aligned? So that may mean having a training, right, where everybody understands the workplace strategy, whether it be a healthy and sustainable workplace strategy or some other type of initiative that the company is bringing forth, and seeing, do those drivers align? Could be having the training, could be having a set of goals, right? Company goals, especially the larger companies, have targets that different divisions need to make. Are those aligned? Because if you're pushing costs on one end, you can't redesign for collaboration on the other, right? So they all need to be able to talk to each other in order to make it work and to be successful in the long run.
Yeah, so that circles back right to communication again, right? Through the training, through goals, and get everyone understanding what the overall objective and vision is. Alex, your thoughts on this, please.
So I'm going to go back to something Lisa said at the beginning, and even from the moment that we decided we're going to talk about place and its value and its role in this new reality, we started throwing around the terms that are being thrown around, and one of them being the hybrid workplace. That's a pet peeve for me. I want to think that, and I would encourage everyone to put aside the word hybrid. We're not mixing anything and creating anything new. But the reality is work can be done anywhere, and we need to be conscious and aware of the different, of the ecosystem in which work is going to get done. And I was going to say the ecosystem of workplaces, but I don't want to say that, because it's an ecosystem of place, technology, and the company's framework, strategy, goals, and all of that. So in the context of those, and I'm sure I'm missing some things, right, is where work is going to happen. And that's why I rather refer to it as an ecosystem of work and not a hybrid workplace, because I don't even think it's a workplace anymore, right? And within that ecosystem, is where the employee is going to have that experience, where he's going to get the sense of belonging, where you're going to be able to attract and retain your talent. So what I'm trying to say with all of that is, this is probably, this moment has highlighted the importance of workplace strategy as a holistic approach, right? So it's not only about the place and us designing the workplace, but it's about everything else that touches the employee experience. And I think that would be a very important factor moving forward when companies think about where their people are able to do their best work, right? So I would just encourage everyone to start thinking about not so much place, but an ecosystem of environments where work happens for your employees.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to make sure that, the panelists have, can share any other thoughts and comments within this topic. We are going to go to Q&A. I see some questions in the queue. So please feel free to add more questions. Really appreciate it, because we have some time here that we'll be able to answer them. But any other comments on this particular topic from the group here?
I'm not sure if potentially to answer one of the questions I see in the chat.
Okay.
Thanks, Don.
Yeah.
About, would there be, for example, team space in the office? And I do feel like there does need to be potentially a sense of belonging, even when we had activity-based or choice-based work environments pre-COVID. If you had sort of a group neighborhood address, so someone at least knew, particularly on large campuses, right? it wasn't like arriving at the airport and you have no idea what of 10 parking garages you're going to. I mean, you had some idea of where you would go to, connect with your department or your business line or whatever that is. So I do think that potentially in slightly different proportions and ratios, that notion of team space or a group neighborhood as a destination is great. And that for sure could support the value of place in its new meaning. I also think, because there was a question earlier about what do explicit social strategies mean, it may have been very just organic before how teams would show up in a neighborhood like that pre-COVID, and know that, at some point they might run into somebody and have that, and understand that within a certain percentage of time, they would see a variety of people. I think now, as there may be, again, a continuation of a fair amount of virtual work, an explicit social strategy example would be, instead of, we invite for, in many industries, there are CEU type credits and that sort of thing, continuing education. Instead of that being something that's a lunch that's once a week that you just send out an invite to, maybe some can be done virtually, and maybe once a month or at some cadence, the business leader or the department leader or the team leader says, let's all plan that on the third Thursday of every month, we're all going to come in for this, right? It's happening anyway. We could attend it virtually. We're all going to come in for this. And then surrounding something that you're going in as a destination, you individually then decide, that's the day I'm also going to schedule time to meet with my mentor. And we're both going to be coming in anyway from wherever, you could live on two different sides of the city, both be coming in. It's just a more intentional, mindful, planful cadence to any of the things we really should be doing. In fact, I think in some regards, I know, I've had more formalized mentees that I've taken on this year and have more scheduled cadence to meeting with them rather than it being somewhat ad hoc. So there are some silver linings and potentially some advantages to just being more mindful and planful. So I don't know if that falls under this, what's the new value and purpose that we can bring through place, but I thought that might address a couple of the things in the chat I've been seeing.
Great.
And I think that as we decide or set the norms for the organizations to set forth the policies to the different employees, we also need to be mindful of people's different functions, right? Because some people are on a lot of calls, some people are doing confidential work, some people, their whole purpose is to sit in a room and hash out and brainstorm. So it's very different needs, and we need to be able to reflect that in the space that people are going to be housed in.
And that, and just real quick, that is, I think Dawn asks, are you partnering with your HR organizations and managers to find out who will still be assigned, who will work flexibly, and who will be full-time remote? And I think what you just mentioned, Lori, has a lot to, ties into that in terms of what their job is, and, the necessity of even going in if their job doesn't require it.
Yeah, and I absolutely think we need to be partnering with HR, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't think that HR can make that decision in a vacuum, right? Because you also have, at this point in time, you have the security needs and the operational concerns of how are we getting everybody up the elevator, mm-hmm. right? We can't have too many people come in at once, for example. Or, so there's a whole real estate side of it as to how many people can we house, or what's feasible from a facility standpoint. How can we restructure? Are we able to even move the tables in the cafeteria to space out, or, or are they nailed down? Whatever little nitty gritty you get into, but that all needs to be addressed, right? We can't just, roll out a proclamation and then have it happen. And again, like I said before, the finance needs to be looped into it. And then the sustainability team needs to be considered as part of the conversation and not as an add-on, because a lot of those policies and the thinking that are in, let's say, the LEED standard or the WELL or the FitWell, those are all tailored to this exact situation, right? Where they're considering what do we need to put into place in terms of lighting, air, resource use, and also sound masking, whatever it is, in order to enable all of these people to be working and doing the different functions in the same place.
Yeah, Alex, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was actually going to add, and I also saw a question come up in the chat window about, again, real estate, HR, but also technology, not only in the sense of the organization, but if we were thinking, what was our, we have plans to change the IT currently in use. And I think that's a very interesting point, Don. Thanks for bringing that up. Two things. I think workplace strategy now more than ever needs to partner with HR and with IT as an organization, because I think it's all new for all of us, and that employee experience will only be enhanced if we looked at that triangle, right? When it comes to actual technologies that need to be improved, yeah, there's plenty of room to be improved, right? Because everybody's fear is that we get to the office and then there's 2 of us, there's 10 of us in the room and 2 of us that are not in the room. And then how is that going to be or feel like? Certainly not very inclusive. So that is something that we need to evaluate. So going back to a phrase that we've said a couple of times here today, the need to be intentional, but I would go even further. We can sit here and talk about what we think is going to happen, but we don't know how things are really going to evolve. So to go back, when we're able to go back to our workplaces with the mentality that we're there to learn and observe, assess what is happening, what is really happening when people come back to the office. Listen to your employees, because it's not only observe, but let's have a dialogue, let's have a conversation. How is that working for teams or not? And partner internally before we act. So to the point of, where do we invest our financial resources, right? Yeah, probably we can test a number of technologies, and we probably should, right? But where exactly and what exactly? And I think it's going to be, even though all of us would love to have the solution and get back in September, in October, whenever it is that we're going back to the perfect collaborative, intentional work environment, I don't think it's that clear cut. So I think if we all recognize that and go in with that mentality that let's learn how this is going to function. Good thing is we're all working and being productive. So it's not like nothing is happening, right? But let's just learn from each other and see, what is that place like now that we have this ecosystem of work environments, right? So what is the function of that place? How can we make that place better? What are the intentions that need to build the function of place and the value of place?
Yeah, and great point, Alex, because leaders do need to keep their finger on the pulse throughout this whole process. Definitely sounds like we do have a lot of work ahead of us, just to continue to monitor and manage what's to come. I do have a few more questions in here. Thank you to all of you for popping them in the chat and the Q&A. So Liz, you're asking about sustainability. You love Lori's comment about that. Just wondering, are your panelists being pulled in the ESG reporting for your companies?
So We're looking at the footprint. I mean, we have a big manufacturing plant presence, right? So that's already part of it in terms of the manufacturing process. But in terms of the real estate itself, that's being looked at as a scope 3 emission. And so are taking a look at that. And we're also looking at partnering with our service providers to see what opportunities there are there to reduce emissions.
Okay. So I also want to address Dawn's question about planning to change the IT currently in use in your meeting rooms to better support a work where you will have a better mix of people videoing in for a meeting at home or elsewhere, balanced with the equal number of offices. Thinking better technology and video connection so everyone can feel part of the meeting versus past feelings of being disconnected from the meetings when working from home. That's a really great question, Dawn, and a very important one. Would anyone like to address that question?
That's what I was referring to as you might need some basic training on new manners.
Yes.
Because it's about basic facilitation techniques that, again, we train people for that are in certain roles. We don't necessarily train the entire population in our organizations. So again, that can be as simple as having, being very mindful and not going to the virtual people last, including them the whole time. It's interesting, I've been working on a mixed use campus study recently where, of course, you've got functions that are site essential or always on. And so how do you want to get sort of cross-functional teams to collaborate with, again, the critical work that's happening in research and development facilities, in process and manufacturing and production sites? That's really, critical to innovation. So how do you use some of the new learnings from this distributed work that we've been in and think about improving how we're connecting people in a more meaningful way? One of the leaders on these interviews said, if I come back and there's a Polycom on the table, I'm not coming back. So again, I think there were things that needed improvement before, and they need to be improved in a more meaningful way. But it's the mindset of the people. You got to change the mindset first, then the behavior, and then the actual work will follow, sort of thing. So.
And I would add, we not only have to improve things that needed improvement, but maybe rethink,
Exactly.
So maybe, do we really want technology, top of the line technology in that monthly meeting that we intentionally are going to set up and create an event for our team to be there? Maybe you don't. Maybe you don't. Maybe there's not
have to come to participate.
Right, the incentive to actually come in person. Maybe you take it away.
So how do we identify the right technologies, leverage them, but also sort of ignore them sometimes, so that we create the right space for human connection that is so sorely missed today.
And inclusivity is going to be key throughout all this. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and ask our panelists just to, in 30 seconds or less, your closing thoughts from our discussion today. We'll go ahead and start with Lisa.
Oh, I would think the most important thing to keep in mind is, again, organization. If you ask any organization, pre-COVID or post, their top 3 goals would be talent, driving innovation, and business resiliency. And those are no different than they were before. But again, we need to rethink the solutions with that framework in mind. And again, I think those as guiding principles to any solutions are good guiding principles.
Great. Alex?
So I'm just going to repeat something I said before. I think we need to really be intentional. We need to be, we need to observe, partner internally, and listen, and then decide where we're going to invest our resources. So kind of take slowly before we knock all the spaces out and just create collaboration spaces. But let's just see how people come back to the office, assess what they need in each one of those different places where work is getting done.
Thank you. Lori.
I see this as a really exciting time for the real estate industry. I think it's a great opportunity to reset and reframe. The real estate is an integral part of a business's success. It's what enables everybody to do their work. Some of the people, right, like are essential workers that need to actually be in person, and others are at home that need to be able to also come in and be engaged and energized through the in-person work. So I think there's such great opportunity there to integrate throughout the business. To do that, we need to consider the individuals by looking at their health and well-being and what are any roadblocks for them in terms of coming into the office and being that fully engaged, productive employee that they can be. And we need to keep a flexible mindset, right? So like everyone said previously, we need to recognize that we're not going to necessarily get this right in September or whichever month your company is going back. It's going to be iterations. And then as future circumstances come up, we're going to have to rethink it again. So I'd love to hear what other folks on the line are seeing in their organizations. And thank you for listening.
I just have to say, ladies, you did a fabulous job today. I can't thank you enough for sharing your thoughts. And I also want to thank the audience today for joining today's session. It is being recorded, and I'm sure we're going to figure out how to share it with all of you, those that couldn't make it. But I do hope you found value in the discussion and some useful nuggets of knowledge. And we all know that we can create a sense of value and purpose, not just for those within our organization, but also for those we serve through our collective effort. A renewal in our sense of value and purpose can help us cultivate greater success. So with that, again, thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.